Everybody has thought about what it would be like to have the power of invisibility. You could walk among the crowds unnoticed. What would you do if you had this power? But apparently this trick was performed back in October 1943, and it was done by the American Navy. Project Invisibility was the secret program to make a destroyer ship and all its crew disappear. This military undertaking went by the codename Project Rainbow. But when word got out of this secret plan, it became known in the conspiracy world as the Philadelphia experiment. It revolved around Albert Einstein's unified field theory, although many think that it was a misuse of Einstein's theory that caused all the problems that came with this project. In the 1940s, the USS Eldridge was one of the newest destroyers in the American Navy. It was launched in July 1943 and was ready for action, although the action it would see was not the usual action a destroyer ship would encounter. Instead, it was commissioned for an experimental mission that was most unusual, setting off from the Philadelphia Naval Yard, Pennsylvania, in October 1943. What was this experiment about? It is important to note that this was happening while the Second World War played out. Therefore, assault and defense tactics were the primary concern of the American forces. Many assumed that they were looking for ways to try to defy radar, so that their ships and planes could go anywhere undetected, and attempting to do this by rendering a ship invisible, creating a cloaking device. To do that, they needed to bend light so that the ship could avoid all detection. The experiment's aim was to degauss the ship. If they could remove the electromagnetic signature, it should make it invisible to radar. Were the scientists aware that this might also make the ship actually physically disappear? In the Philadelphia Naval Yard, the USS Eldridge was fitted out with complicated pieces of electronic equipment that were made especially for this experiment. The machines and equipment on board were turned on, and so began the test to see if the ship could not be detected on the electromagnetic scale. To the surprise of those watching from the port, very odd things began to happen to the ship and its crew. First it began to fade, and then it actually disappeared from sight completely. The people in the port recording the effects assumed that the ship had become invisible. They were not aware that the ship had not only disappeared from sight, but that it had actually disappeared physically. They were to realize later that the ship had vanished and then reappeared off the coast of Norfolk, Virginia, where it remained for a few minutes before disappearing again, and then rematerializing back at the naval docks in Philadelphia. When the ship reappeared, it had a horrifying change about it. It did not return as it had left. It seemed to be out of sync with time and space. Crew members were trapped in walls or fused into floors, as if they had been shifted out of place with the material world. Some were frozen in place, others were on fire, whilst many more were talking gibberish and ranting about monstrous beings. The experiment seemed to have caused a molecular disruption, and this had resulted in the various incidents on board. This shift meant that the crew were fusing with solid objects, flesh and blood combining with solid walls and decks. They had become physically intertwined when they reappeared at the naval dockyard. This all happened within a matter of minutes, and it was an apparent warping of time and space, which had a physical and a mental impact on all involved. The forces created in the field of the experiment were dangerous and unpredictable. Did the Navy work out how to make a ship teleport from one place to another instantaneously? Or was this just a surprise side effect of their experiment? It was soon discovered that many of the crew were missing and were never seen again. Others had to be committed to the sanitarium with serious mental issues. Of course, there is a wall of silence from the American Navy about this project, and supposedly many of the sailors involved lost their lives or were driven insane from the effects of the forces created by the experiment, and also from what they had witnessed. Should records be held by the Navy relating to this experiment, they are likely to be highly classified and buried, with no prospect of release. So how did this story get out into the public realm? Apparently some of the survivors made it to a local bar in the nearest town, where they recounted their tale, scaring the waitresses and other drinkers with the horrific details. But the most damning evidence came from letters sent to the scientist Morris Jessup, renowned for his articles and research into UFO phenomena and author of the book The Case for the UFO. Jessup received this information from a man named Carlos Miguel Allende. These rather oddly written letters that were posted from Philadelphia explained how Allende had been a merchant seaman and was a crew member of the USS Eldridge, a ship that was in the Norfolk dock when the experiment was taking place on the USS Eldridge, and how he and the whole crew were witnesses to what occurred upon the Eldridge. Allende states that he saw the ship appear in the Norfolk dock from nowhere. He writes in his letters that the result was complete invisibility of a destroyer-type ship and all of its crew, while at sea in October 1943. The effective field was spherical in shape, extending 100 yards out from the ship, he said. Any person within that sphere became vague in form, and he observed those persons on board the ship, as though they were of this state yet walking on nothing. Allende goes on to say in his letters that half of the officers and crew were now insane due to the effects of this experiment. Of course, this all sounds like the rantings of a madman. Maybe from being in the vicinity of the experiment, Allende himself was affected, or maybe he's telling the truth. But what is it about electromagnetic fields that is so interesting to scientists? They were trying to uncover the secrets of the universe, but along with that came some unstable scientific results. Is it work for the good of humanity, or just an attempt to advance military technology? Did this experiment prove that there are other dimensions in time and space? That too opens a whole new field of our understanding of who we are as humans, and what our place is in the universe. It shows that there are things far beyond our understanding and far beyond our imagination. Did this experiment prove that becoming invisible comes at a great price that affects not only the human body, but also space and time itself? And one has to wonder if we should really be playing around with these forces. There have been several books written on this subject, and in 1984 a film was made based on the events, with a sequel in 1993, but many people are convinced that the whole story is an elaborate hoax created by Allende simply for the purposes of increased publicity and notoriety. Let us know what you think about it in the comments below, and please be sure to like and subscribe.